Testing, 1, 2, 1, 2, testing.
Good morning, everyone. We have quorum in the room, so if we can get started. I'd like to start off this morning by it's Bring Your Child to Work Day, and so I'd like to recognize that we have a couple of students in the audience with us today. We have Simon Biotlo, and we have Arlo Harmer. And so welcome. And if you have any questions, ask your mom or dad. But no, seriously, if you have any questions, feel free to. I'm sure any of the committee members would be happy to have a chat with you after committee if there's any questions about what we've done or how we've done it. So welcome. Councillor Middick will not be here today. And declarations of interest, we have none received. Communications as set out in the agenda, as noted in the agenda. Oh, sorry. I skipped over the minutes. So the minutes of October the 5th. Thank you. The first agenda item that we have is Safety Initiatives, Children's Walk to School report. Now, we don't have a presentation, but we have staff here, and we do have a speaker listed, so we'll hold that item. Next, we have status update on Transportation Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending the 25th of October 2016. Received? Thank you. So we will go to the first item on the agenda then, where we have a speaker listed, Safety Initiatives Children's Walk to School report, and we have Mr. J.P. Unger. If Mr. Unger could come up to the front. Good morning, sir. It's the one right on the end there. And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I was told that if I were to talk to all the points I had, which were questions about the LRT and safety, I would not be allowed to speak, which surprised me because usually citizens are given 5 minutes to address a committee. But it is about traffic, it is about safety. I do have a set of questions, which I'll send in writing, but the main one is that I want to call for urgently for an external independent engineering and safety audit of the LRT tunnel construction. I think that's a big safety issue for all of us. We don't know what's happening, and I think that it might be better to, if it's deemed unsafe, it's better to cut our losses and look at other options before all the money goes into that and more time and resources are spent into that. I can.
Thank you. Do you have anything in particular about the Children's Walk to School report?
Well, specifically on that, no, except that as a concerned parent and resident, I think that greater enforcement has to be carried out, and tough enforcement of speeding especially. And I think the city could invest more in speed bumps, which is the most effective way to reduce speed.
Okay, as for any questions you have around the LRT, it's stretching it a little bit to have that discussion here this morning. But if you have something in writing and you want to forward it to me as the chair, I'll make sure that the rail office has it and has a look at your concerns and responds to them. So feel free to email me. Is there anything else that you'd like to say again in regard to the item on the agenda?
Not at this point, but I'll gladly share the questions and, and requests.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks.
That's fine. I was going to move to that next. So we'll create a speakers list then for staff. So first is Vice Chair McKinney. Anybody else wish to get on the speakers list? Councillor Chimichenko and Councillor Kadri. Okay. So we have Phil Landry and Krista Tanaka here to answer questions. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to start by thanking staff for the report back on Children's Walk to School. It's It's very comprehensive, a good list of everything we're doing. It's really helpful to understand where all those partnerships are and how they intersect with what we're trying to accomplish here at the city. So I do thank you for that. It's good to have it all in one little handy booklet. I will keep that for the rest of the term. I just wondered, though, in terms of our overall goal, so we've got this report and kind of follows up on what the previous speaker was talking about, just in terms of, what is our goal for kids walking to school, for creating that, safety around, not just in the absolute school zones, but around the schools as well. So do we, I know that we partner with the schools, the school active transportation, and I think it's through public health is one of the partners there. Do you know, has there been any real thought given to how we would reduce speeds around schools and school zones? I know that, Edmonton just did around high schools, actually, but I know that, Toronto, Waterloo, Guelph have also reduced speeds to 30 kilometers an hour. We know that that's the speed at which if someone is hit by a driver in a vehicle, that the chances of not having serious injury or death is much greater. So is there any thought being given to that? I know that you're coming back, I think, in Q1 with a 30-kilometer-an-hour report. Is that part of it? Will we be looking at reducing speeds in school zones?
Hi, Councillor. Yeah, that's one of the things that we're looking at. I mean, today what we do is to provide that awareness. So through some of the measures like the temporary traffic calming flex stakes we have in schools, we have speed boards to provide that awareness. But in terms of the 30 kilometers, we will be bringing forward a report in Q1 of 2017 that talks about the things that need to be in place to ensure that we actually achieve that speed. Because just changing a sign to 30 without changing the environment really won't provide any real change unless there's enforcement there all the time. And in other provinces, that's the case. They do have devices like, I know in Edmonton and Alberta, they've got photo radar, which are placed in schools. And we did discuss this earlier this year in terms of asking the province for that. So if we have the tools, then those things will be helpful to ensure that we have compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. Having it coupled with photo radar, certainly we've seen in other jurisdictions that it does bring it down. Do we have a list of signal, like sign speed limits across the city in school zones? Or are you able to provide that?
Well, we have, we can provide, you want the locations where we have, like school speed zones?
Yeah, like what are the speed limits in each of our school zones across the city? Like what, I mean, I'm thinking of my school, in this ward, in the ward that I represent, obviously, Booth, Elgin, those streets where you have schools. Bayview, which is just in the ward next to us. But do we have that information for? I guess what I'm curious to see is, where are we at with speed limits, and what do our roadways look like coupled with those speed limits across the city in school zones?
We can provide you that information. I think in general the speed limits vary. They go from 40 kilometers an hour to 50 to 60, and I think out in the rural areas we may have some up at 80. Okay. But I know in some of the rural areas we've had issues. We reduce the speed limit through school speed zones when kids are coming in or leaving school. So it varies, depends on the road and the area. But we can provide you a list of locations and what the criteria would be in terms of the speed limit in those areas.
Maybe that would be helpful if it's possible. It might be a bit of work, but if it's possible, along with the 30-kilometer-an-hour report that's coming in Q1, that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on the list is Councillor Chernyshenko.
Thank you very much. I believe this is on topic enough that it's the right place to ask it. I've got questions around the safety guards. I know the adult safe crossing program, which of course ties into walking to school for children, and often parents' decision that it's okay to let them walk to school unaccompanied at a certain age. I know that budget is often a restriction on expanding that program and taking new requests. Can you remind me what the criterion are for when we would deem it necessary, and then what the process is for applying, if you will, or submitting a request for new for a new location?
Is that on? Oh, hi. So if somebody would like to request a review for an adult school crossing guard, they just have to submit the request through 311, and it'll get forwarded to the coordinator for school zone safety. If you submit before the end of March of the coming school year, so if you, for this coming school year, if you submit before the end of March 2017, it'll be reviewed throughout the spring, and we will identify the locations that are warranted before the school starts so that we can implement them. There are different criteria for the different types of locations, so a mid-block location versus an always stop location versus a signalized location. So one is a gap study, one is a compliance study with the always stop, and then the other one is a conflict study at a signal. So how many conflicts are there between pedestrians and motorized vehicles at the signal? And then there's the base criteria of at least 10 students. So if you have the 10 students and one of the criteria and the trigger criteria for the type of traffic control, then it would be warranted, and it goes on the list of warranted locations. Typically, we request 10 new locations every year as part of the budget process. We, more often than not, are able to implement all of the warranted locations every year, but from time to time we do have a little bit of a couple of extra locations that have to be deferred to the following year.
Mm-hmm. So we're midstream, if you will, now in a school year. Does that mean that it's effectively not till the 2017-18 school year that you would be looking, or is it ever the case where mid-year a new location's chosen?
The requests can be submitted at any time as long as they're in before the end of March of the coming school year, because we don't implement throughout the year. We've only got budget to implement 10 new in the next school year, so in September 2017. So any requests that come in before March we'll review for that school year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just want to, before I go to the next speaker, just want to note that it appears we've had a few more students arrive with their parents. I just judging by the look and the age. So I'll just reiterate what we said at the beginning of the meeting, but after the meeting, if anybody has any questions about what we did or why we did it or anything else about the committee, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. So our next councillor is Councillor Caudry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Just a comment, first of all, to our staff that the report that you presented this morning is well written and covers pretty much all of the aspects of a school walking program in terms of children's safety. Just want to point out the fact that thank you for recognizing the efforts of Ottawa Public Health that are a key partner in this project, working with the traffic department in the city. Thirdly, just a couple of questions about construction sites in and around school zones. If there's active construction happening in front of an elementary school or a high school, what are the protocols for students to follow, or who enforces those protocols?
So in construction zones, we work with the project managers in infrastructure services, if it's a city project, or if it's utilities with their project managers as well as developers, to ensure that there's safe passages. So we'll provide requirements in terms of having fencing or a flat surface. We've also at times had the contractor supply flag people to ensure that the kids can go through. So it's basically location by location. We do an evaluation to ensure that the kids can get to school safely, and we would work as well with the school principal to ensure that that there's a safe passage for all the kids to get through to school.
So I just want to emphasize that point, Mr. Landry, that you are working with school management in terms of guaranteeing safe passage. My concern is more so with the operator of a vehicle, that comes in, let's say, at 11 o'clock in the morning, and he or she parks right in front of the construction area, right in front of where the access is for the pedestrian, who would control something like that? Would that be somebody on site supervisor that would do that, or is it the school's responsibility to ask the contractor to move that vehicle?
If it's a contract vehicle, so if it's a backhoe or that type of equipment, then it would be the contractor. If it's a vehicle parking, then by law enforcement. I think the contractor would go and talk to the person if they're blocking passages. If there's a specific example that you can provide us, we can follow up in terms of trying to find what the issues were and find solutions. But it depends on who the person is. Like I said, if it's just a general public person and they're parking in no parking or no stopping zones, then city bylaw would go and enforce that.
And thank you, Log. I will take that conversation offline with you. Just wanted to emphasize for the committee the fact that construction is happening on one side of the street. The vehicles are parked on the opposite side of the street, so even though there may be so-called safe passage for the students, but the construction vehicles parked on the opposite side do present a hazard for those pedestrians. So just, like I said, I'll come back to you offline on that. The other question I had this morning, Mr. Landry, is the fact that from pathways coming onto roads, I know there's some signage that is put on those pathways for the pathway user to be careful when entering the road surface, but I don't see any indication for the vehicle driver on the road to say they're approaching a path coming up, so be careful passing that. Are there any signage like that available with the city?
We do have warning signs that we'll use at times in terms of just providing awareness that there's pedestrians in the area. So again, if there's a specific location, we can do an evaluation and see what we can do to try to enhance the area to provide that awareness to drivers that they're approaching a pathway.
But there's no particular signage that warns the driver that they're approaching a pathway intersecting with the road?
Well, we do have signage that we could use. It depends if the pathway's hidden. Then we can look at things like that. It's going to provide awareness. If it's a wide open area where people would expect to see, could see the pathway, then it may not be required. But it's basically site specific in terms of what we can do in that respect.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Landry, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? I just wanted to make a few comments then, if I could. I want to thank staff for, I think, what's a very comprehensive report. One of the things that we don't do particularly well at the city is getting the message out about the good work that staff is doing, especially when that work is spread amongst a variety of departments and a variety of services. So I think this is an excellent example or a template that we can use going forward to sort of pull all this information together, have it in a central place. And so now if anybody wants to know about school safety, this report highlights all the programs, all the services that do it. So I want to thank Phil, you and your team for pulling this all together. I know you had to work in conjunction with a variety of other departments and services to do it, but I think it's made it basically a one-stop shop now for anybody who has any questions around this issue, which is important to all of us. So I want to thank you very much for doing that. It's an excellent report. So moving ahead then, received? Moving ahead then, are there any notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting? Okay, any inquiries? Other business? Okay, adjournment? Thank you. The next meeting is December the 7th, 2016.